Are you satisfied with your understanding of sustainability? If you are not, imagine a journey together, a pluralistic one, with academia, innovators, startups, NGOs, all looking for solutions to the greatest challenge of our time. My name is Samuele Tini, and this is the Sustainability Journey. Welcome to a new episode. Today we are going to discuss the role of activism and the role of movement, and we do it with somebody who has got the headlines, we might say, for the past year. So I'm very pleased to have here a change maker and a leader, Dr.Gail Bradbrook. She is the co-founder of the Extinction Rebellion. So thank you so much, Gail, for being here with us today.
You're welcome. It's nice to be here.
Gail, Extinction Rebellion has made the headlines, and we know you have also an awful lot of things going on and new initiatives. But our usual question for our guest is, who is Gail? What is your journey?
Thank you. In a nutshell, I'm the daughter of a coal miner. So I have a fossil fuel background, working class background. I'm a trained scientist. I did a PhD in molecular biophysics. I'm a mother of 2 children, and I'm especially fascinated with how change happens and the necessity for change. And it's an ongoing life story to wonder how we bring about the necessary change in this time, and even asking the biggest questions, why would a species destroy life on Earth? So that's kind of who I am. A bit of a nerd, really, all said.
And change, you say that a keyword, change, and the role of systemic change. So can I ask you why and what do you think about this, and how we can really change the system that we are in, especially looking at the crisis that we are, the climate crisis?
It's a really, really big question, because this is a system. It's not just a capitalist, extractive economic system. It's also a paradigm of domination and control that's probably been running for several thousand years, speeded up in the last 500 with colonialism and neocolonialism and neoliberalism. But it's been around for a long time, and it includes a systemic feedback loop called the success to success mechanism, which means that if you get a certain amount of power and wealth, you can use that to get more power and wealth and to capture democracy. So we're coming to some kind of end times in it, I think, in the global north with this system, in the sense that it has tried to give the appearance of supporting human rights and of being democratic. And I'm not saying it doesn't have some flavors of that at some time, and people have fought for that. But underneath that, there's always been a system of domination and control and extraction that our family in the global south, especially, and working class people all over the world, have really suffered at the hands of. How do you change such a system? You're not going to change it by asking it to change, or asking people that appear to have positions of power to make the change. Although it's quite, in my view, appropriate for people to make demands of leaders. But at the same time, what those demands help to do is to show the unwilling of this system to behave in a rational way, in a way that protects life. It reveals itself to be an anti-life system. So what civil disobedience has been able to achieve in the last few years is to break through the silence around climate change, the climate denial, and to bring it more into public consciousness as something of deep concern. What we've not managed to do yet, which is really essential, is to assert economic power. And that's a much harder thing to do. And I can say more about how one might go about that, but you have to find a way to say no economically to the system. And of course, part of what you also have to do is to start building alternative structures and systems at the same time within this one, which is not easy, because this one will resist it and it won't fund it. And starting a business like a B corporation in this environment, there can be an uphill battle, but we do need to build the kind of what some people call post-capitalist infrastructure as this system actually falls to pieces, as the climate system moves into a different state and creates chaos in the food systems, collapse around the world. We're not looking at good times ahead, but there are then in all of that opportunities to try and build the new.
It's really an interesting perspective, and that's discussion, and that's reasoning made you create, and then start the Extinction Rebellion movement? And of course, I want to ask as the first question, why, when you were with your co-founder, called it Extinction Rebellion, and which were the objectives of the movement?
Yeah, we were part of a collective called Rising Up that had originally been called Compassionate Revolution. And maybe to say that because ultimately many of us have got a revolutionary perspective on how change needs to occur. Extinction Rebellion was a kind of campaign, I guess, that became a social movement. It spread to over 75 countries, and there's over 1,000 groups in different parts of the world. And we had three main demands. One was for leaders to tell the truth, to actually come out and own the dire straits that we're in and the need for urgent and rapid change. The second demand was to set very short net zero targets, so to be aiming to decarbonize the economy really, really rapidly. And the third one was, and to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. And the third one was, well, how do you actually go about that at the detailed level? It wasn't for Extinction Rebellion to be coming up with the details on that, because there are debates within that, and that we wanted a citizens' assembly to review what possible policy changes could be made. Well, in the UK, we've achieved something towards each of those demands. Certainly, there is more out in the public domain, people being truthful about the climate crisis, although we can certainly do with more of that. There was a net zero target set by the UK government, set into law, although in our view too late, 2050. And there was even a citizens' assembly that looked at the detail, but the government hasn't taken up the policies. So things have shifted, but ultimately the machine carries on and life on Earth is still being destroyed. And I suppose in that way, that's why we picked that name, to put together the, in a word, extinction. We're in the 6th mass extinction event. This is what's happening, and it's not happening by accident. It's been done to life on Earth by human activity. And rebellion, it's the duty of a thinking citizen to rebel against their governments and the powers that be, and realise they're not really our governments at all. Actually, they're the governments of corporations, and we shouldn't be obedient in the face of that. It's time to be disobedient and to use the power of non-violent civil disobedience to make our case and our demands. So that's why we called it Extinction Rebellion. We declared ourselves to be in rebellion against the British government.
And thank you so much, Gail. It's a way to show the change and the urge and the need for change. So let me ask you a question before then we go deeper into the proposal and how we can change the economic system and work. So I must say that on the advocacy part, seriously, your movement and others have really done miles in changing also the debate and bringing climate change and sustainability to be from a niche that we all know that we were discussing from the 70s and 80s now to the public domain. Some critics, and I might ask you, I know you are now in other work within the movement, but I want to ask, some critics might say that these protests sometimes that are a bit very lively, we can put it in this way, or maybe they can stop traffic, or others may be counterproductive and create also a sort of movement against and be counterproductive for your movement. What is your response on that?
Well, it's interesting you're saying that, because let's look at it through a systemic lens. What you're saying is incorrect. It's not held up by the social science. You could look at social change lab research, for example. So why is that said so often? That's more my question back to you. Why do you think that might be true? Where have you heard that from? Because what's happened is our movements have been successful. They don't put people off the cause. If anything, they encourage more people to join. But we never set out to be liked. We set out to start a conversation. You don't get the coverage you need. You don't get the exposure. You don't get the thing tabled if you stand by the side of the road and wave a placard around. People ignore you. In fact, in Extinction Rebellion, the tactics recently have been about not disrupting the public. And it's not all about media coverage, but media coverage is certainly part of what the process involves. And we had 2 people from Just Stop Oil, and we had 100,000 people on the streets twice. 2 people, 100,000. Vast more coverage for the Just Stop Oil, which did more disruptive tactics, and are known for roadblocking. So just in terms of coverage, it's the press that creates that need by not doing their job properly in the first case. But behind the scenes, we know that there are networks of lobbyists funded by big oil and fossil fuel and other interests that put pressure on activists and activism, call us extremists, all this sort of nonsense. And they organise against us. They've written even protest laws and that have been taken on the statute books. And they sow seeds that say things like, oh, you're just setting people against you. And before you know it, this idea pops up, like climate denial did. It pops up here, it pops up there. Everybody's saying it, everybody's repeating it. And it's a propaganda machine. And who actually does the research? Like, oh, where is the evidence for that being true? It's not true. The evidence is the opposite. So I think look at it through a systemic lens. When you think about something to do with climate change and you think you have an opinion about it, where did you get that opinion from? Because after climate denial, we're now in a stage where there are 12 discourses of delay that those same lobbyists, PR agencies, etc., Hill and Knowlton, well known for it, have been sowing out into the world. So, for example, if you go onto a podcast, you can expect somebody to say, or a news program, what about India and China? What aboutism? That's one of them. Or you should make change as an individual, or like, oh, technology is going to save us. There's a whole pile of things that, or it's all too late now anyway, so why bother? Oh, we've got targets, we just aren't quite meeting them yet. There are a whole series of things that are happening. And they will influence what people think, and they think they're having opinions, but they've been sown by lobbyists. So it's important to really look at sources of information and and challenge what you think you might know about something.
That is very important. Thank you for that, because it's of course what we are doing in the post, giving voice to different people, giving different perspectives, and so people they can have a reasoned opinion. And I want to ask this question. Usually the movement is known by and all the movement, not only Extinction Rebellion and other, it's more on the critics to the system work. So what is the old oratoria that we were studying in school is the pars destruens, what you destroy. But what is the proposal? What is the Extinction Rebellion proposal? What in the oratory was called pars construens. So what is the future that the movement envisaged?
From an Extinction Rebellion point of view, we've been saying for a long time that we need to upgrade democracy, that there is deep issues in democracy, it's captured to vested interests, and that in order to trust people's voices, we need to listen to deliberative processes like the citizens' assembly processes. And then in terms of what those assemblies might come up with, there are many, many different things that can be done in the world to make change at this time. There are alternative economic systems. I personally am a big fan of degrowth and some aspects of circular economies. The idea of having a law of ecocide at the international level on the Rome statutes, regenerative farming practices. There are many, many things that the localization agenda to localize economies more, etc. So there is much that can be done. Other people might have a different list, and so that's why XR doesn't have a kind of detailed proposal for how to get to net zero for any given country, because we believe that everybody should have a say in that, and that's why you have a representative sample of the population in such an assembly, and they tend to come up with good ideas if they're given good information as part of that.
And thank you, Gail. And one of the initiatives you are spearheading now within the movement is the Extinction Rebellion Being the Change. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, I think what one of the things that Being the Change wants to do is to come from this deeper perspective of what really is the nature of the problem that we're facing. So when you first get alarmed about climate change and sort of wake up to the environmental crises that we're in, you might start to notice there are meta crises, there's a mental health crises, there are inequality crises, and they have root causes. And so that's a journey that we believe people need to go on to educate themselves, because we live in a miseducation system that's making us think that everything's more or less okay. You just need to tweak a few policies here and there. No, the political economy that we're in is grotesque, and it's based in colonialist extraction. So part of being the change is to take oneself on that journey of deepening the understanding, and therefore like what needs to be done. And I guess I was spurred on that journey through relationships with my family who aren't racialized as white, who come somewhat from outside this paradigm, who are part of the global majority. So family who are Pan-African reparationists, Sufi practitioners of somatic processes to listen to the body's wisdom. So things that may seem not directly connected to climate change, but actually are deeply connected. Where does the system of extraction show up in ourselves? How does it create divisions? How does it prevent us from collaborating? Who does it suggest that we listen to and who we are less likely to listen to? And where does power lie in the world? So one of the things that can happen with the Global North movements is that we feel that this is all about us and the change is going to come from us. And of course we have our role to play, and we must. But where my eyes have been open is to look wider at the brilliant leadership across the world. So, for example, Petros in Colombia, that XR had a little bit to do with in terms of his election, by the way. Very, very powerful, progressive voice. And then you may be aware that there's been deep change in West Africa, actually, in the Alliance of Sahel States. There's a decolonial struggle there right now. It's misinterpreted, often online. I was invited to go there as part of a delegation. There are people, the military took over the governments throughout puppet leaders, and there was a deep backing by the people for that decolonial change. And where that's interesting from a climate change point of view, and where I find common cause with my family there in West Africa, is that they are saying no to France having uranium for 80 cents a tonne when it's 200 euros on the open market. Burkina Faso saying we don't recognise colonial debt. Mali doing debt audits, etc. So the idea that family in the global south would start to say, no, you're not having our stuff for next to nothing, we're in charge, we're deciding what's best for our country, and we don't recognise these debts. And also what the Alliance of Sahel States are talking about is creating their own currency. Now that if you look at what Jason Hickel, who's a leading degrowther, talks about with Dongo Sambasayan, modern monetary theorist, that's a form of unilateral decolonisation that could spur degrowth in the global north. So that's a long way of saying that the global elites that keep running an economic system that's destroying life on Earth, how can we challenge their power? One way is to support our family in the global south in their struggles for sovereignty. It's not all about what we do in the global north, and begging the elites to change isn't going to do it. We have to say no. A thing that we could do in the global north is refuse to pay bills. Like I've not paid one of my water bills because of the pollution in the water. We also have ways we can push economic pressure.
So it is an interesting, it's an interesting perspective. And I want to ask, what is the future of this movement, then the movement, the different ways and movement in asking for change and systemic change in our economic systems?
Well, as I say, I know probably a language difference, but asking for change is probably not going to do anything. We have to make the change happen. Partly, the systems are in collapse right now, and how that collapse comes about remains to be seen. But the climate system, the finance system, and the food system are all very deeply intertwined, and they underpin civilizations. And so, a leading collapsologist, Professor Jem Bendell, says from the data that civilizational collapse started in 2015. And you can feel that if you're living in the global north, the erosion of public services, the falling to pieces of public well-being of the shared spaces. And as that accelerates, my view is that the movements need to focus on deep work in communities to socially prepare together and create the post-capitalist infrastructure that's needed. So how will we make decisions together? You can see elements of this when there's hurricanes, mudslides, etc. People face terrible experiences together, and they can come through it if they can self-organize and make decisions well. So there are emergent practices thinking about mutual aid and how that can sow the seeds for a new world. In that way, I'd recommend Adam Greenfield's book Lifehouse for people to consider the times of collapse need. And if you want to think more about how the systems show up in you and how to help be the change and grow away from those systems, then I very much also recommend Hospice in Modernity by Vanessa Mercado de Oliveira.
Thank you, Gail. And as a last question, we have discussed a lot about emerging markets. I mean, a different perspective. That's the one you have put, no? Emerging markets, the role of the new areas. I want to ask you about this, I mean, because you might have a different perspective about China and India, about Africa, the IMF. You might not be very happy to discuss about, but IMF, Christian at this century, the African century, and the Middle East and others. So some people argued in this podcast that we should move away just for having the global north, but actually movements and sustainability and work will be solved by in the South and in the emerging markets. I want to ask your perspective on that. How do you see the new shift that is there, and which is the role they can play, the new players and the new elite also in the world?
I think, as I said, that I think the power in the global South is about global South family saying no to extraction and rejecting the neoliberal paradigm, rejecting the idea of they already have markets in the global South. You know, it's markets, a phenomena of people getting together and trading, capitalist markets in which there's a need for continued economic growth, inherently problematic. I mean, the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, make themselves into a nonsense in my view, because goal, I always forget if it's 7 or 11, but the goal that says we should have decent work, yes, indeed, I agree with that. And economic growth, no. Economic growth is generally really, really bad. After a certain level, if your country is underdeveloped, then yeah, a certain amount of increased economic activity is a good thing. But how do we get to a steady state? If you're trying to drive change within the paradigm of economic growth, you're going to destroy the planet. That is a well-established fact, I would say, based on various literatures. And if you want probably a go-to reference on that, that would be Tim Parrique, who again is another degrowther. But the argument's done. Really, it's a kind of a version of the insanity that tries to keep the current story alive and then just disguise it in some greenwashing. I don't know particularly more detail about, you know, where other countries want to move towards in their development. I mean, that's a thing for people to be in together. But I would say, look at the devastation in the global north. Look how unwell we are. Look how unwell our rivers are. Look how unwell our children are. Don't copy us. The family that I work with who are Pan-Africanists talk about planet repairs as a framework. There's cognitive justice, environmental justice, and reparatory justice. So don't be told that your indigenous ways of being with your own land is problematic and you need to import some other ways. That's a matter of cognitive justice, and that there's a need for deep repair, including of those colonial borders that Europe set down 140 years ago. And if people want to do something on that point, please join Praler, PRALER.net. We have a conference to look at 140 years since the Berlin Conference coming up and other decolonial practices. So we need to repair and we need to stop the harm, and we need to look at other ways of being in modern life and in as much wellness as possible, but also root into the land and keep the land well. And I don't look to the IMF for steers on that, to be honest.
No, it's interesting. I mean, it's a different perspective. Of course, discussing and being the global south for many years, the main discussion it is how we can reach and be the same consumption and the same work. So the transformation that you say from citizen to consumer, that has been in the past 100 years. The transformation and the rise of capitalism, I can see it and I see it every day. And of course, it has led to some improvement. On the other side, the downside has been the destruction of the natural capital, as we call it, in a very big way. So if we continue in this road, as you said, copying the models that have been done in other areas, it might be even very problematic. It will be very difficult. I mean, but it's already happening. I mean, I understand your voice, but I see it every single day. Every single day we consume more soils. Every single day we cement more. Every single day. So it's not easy. It's something.
Well, this is what I mean by the system, though. It's a success to success mechanism. Those that have got money and power will use it. They'll go to new places to extract. There's a fight against lithium mining in Ghana at the minute, for example. You can't live without clean water and clean air and a healthy soil. Half the world's going to die. That's the prediction.
And as the last question, I want to ask, which is the message you want to leave to our audience? Even to people that they might not think, or they might be not in line with your line of thinking.
I really like this initiative called The Week.oo. It's a place to go and be with your family and friends online and really understand the nature of the crisis that we're in, and to go through a journey together to find out what's yours to do. I've told you about something about my journey and what I'm focused on, but I think the times that we're in really call for us to find what's ours to do, and to be responsible grown-ups in a consumerist culture that wants to turn us into greedy, sort of self-obsessed narcissists that are also unhappy. So there's a way, like, for each of us to find our own purpose and our own journey. So yeah, blessings on everybody for that journey, by the way.
And thank you so much, Gail, for your sharing your perspective. It's been very interesting. I might say that some of the guests might not be agreeing with you, but it is the way we are here at the sustainability journey, giving voice to different perspectives to make people think. And I'm very pleased to have you here today. Thank you so much, Gail.
Thank you.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.